Hey everyone, CJ here at Top Deck Cards and Games. Today I'm going to talk about something a little different from what I normally do, which is the Legacy format for Magic the Gathering. Legacy is a fairly popular format that's a little difficult to get into, so I thought it might help to show the format to some more people, and something we're really trying to push here and get tournaments going, since a lot of our local player base really likes the format. Today I'm going to talk about the Shardless BUG deck, which is one of my favorite decks in the format. It's very good in our local metagame, which is why I have it put together right now. And let's just get started at the creatures. First off, we have 4 Deathrite Shamans. Deathrite's one of the best cards in the format. It's a threat, acceleration, and resource denial all in one card. It's a 1-mana planeswalker, really. Yes, you have to sink a mana into it to use either the denial effects, but early in the game you're generally going to use it to just accelerate your mana, since it's not costed to use and there's so many fetch lands in the format. Then we have 4 Tarmogoyfs. It's the deck's main win condition. One of the strongest beaters in the format, and a mainstay really. Like, you're not going to show up at a Legacy event and not see Tarmogoyfs on the table. Then we have 4 Baleful Strix, which is not a card every list wants to play 4 of, but it's very good in a metagame that has a lot of fair creature decks and a lot of Delver lists. It's a very strong card if resolved against those decks. It really forces counterspells a lot of the time, or at least lightning bolts, because they don't really want to trade their Tarmogoyf for Nimble Mongoose with the Baleful Strix that already drew you a card. So I wouldn't recommend playing 4 of these in every metagame, but around here it's actually pretty strong. Then the last creature is 4 Shardless Agents. It's the deck, or the card the deck's named after, rather. It's a 2/2 with Cascade. There's not many cards in this deck that are bad Cascade targets. The most disappointing thing you can hit is a Deathrite Shaman, and I just covered how strong that card is. So it's a pretty strong card, and it's a big source of card advantage. It leads to a lot of blowouts, and it's the way this deck gets as far ahead as it can. So, moving on to the non-creature spells, we have the biggest blowout card you can cascade into with Shardless Agent, which is Ancestral Visions. Visions, well, if you cascade into it, is literally Ancestral Recall. Nobody's going to complain about drawing 3 cards for free. It's a very, very strong effect. Obviously, drawing cards is always good. Drawing 3 of them is, better than most. So, it's a strong card, and when you have a lot of fair decks in your format with very little combo, it's really not too bad to just suspend it either. Normally you're going to be alive for those turns, even against the more aggressive decks like Delver. As long as you're not playing against combo, you're going to survive the turns to cascade, or suspend it rather, and then cast it, which is going to force counter magic. Even if they counter it with 1 card, that means they've spent mana and a counterspell, and you're able to push through other plays. Next is 4 Brainstorms. It's a very, very iconic card in the Legacy format. If you're playing blue, you're playing Brainstorm. That's just the way it works most of the time. Brainstorm has a lot of cool interactions with this deck. By a lot, I mean 1 with Shardless Agent, letting you draw your cards, put cards back on top, and then cascade. So you can stack a card you don't want on top that Shardless Agent would cascade over, and then an Ancestral Vision, so you effectively get a shuffle effect and draw 3 cards in 1. Which is a very, very powerful effect, along with its general interaction with fetch lands of letting you get, 3 new cards, put 2 back, and shuffle them away. It's the strongest card selection in the format, and it's here to stay. Then we have 4 Abrupt Decays, which is arguably the best removal spell in the format. There's so few cards you want to kill that cost more than 3 mana, almost exclusively Batterskull and Tombstalker off the top of my head. And not being countered is extremely relevant. This is one of the best cards you can see against like a Rug Delver deck, or even against, honestly, like Miracles. You need to keep their counterbalances off the table. So this is a 4 of auto-include for me. It deals with so many problem cards. It kills Tarmogoyfs, Delver of Secrets, Deathrite Shamans, counterbalance, like I said, Stoneforge Mystic. Even the Germ token off Batterskull if you're just trying to out-tempo your opponent if you get into a strange situation like that. It's just far too good not to play. Then we have 4 Hymn to Thorax. Mine look disgusting because they don't match. It really bothers me. But Hymn to Thorax is the strongest resource denial card you can play in black, especially at 2 mana. Discarding 2 random cards is debatably strictly better than, not debatably strictly better, but debatably a lot better than targeted discard. I would rather get 2 cards out of my opponent's hand, especially if I'm playing the card for free, but that's almost irrelevant, when considering which card's better to play. But what this card does a lot of the time is get Force of Willed, which, they picked what cards they're discarding instead of it being random, but nonetheless, it forces your opponent to play a counterspell, or you're going to get a lot of advantage and really, really run them out of resources quickly. Hymnatoric is my favorite reason to play black decks. I almost exclusively play black decks when I'm not playing a combo deck in the format, and this card and this card are really, really the big reasons why. The other one is Liliana, the Veil. She's very, very strong right now. The main reason I say that is because of the Edict effect, especially in a deck like this where you can't play Diabolic Edict because it's not a very consistent card to cascade into. Liliana gives you a good sacrifice effect to deal with True Name Nemesis and Nimble Mongoose. Those are staple cards of the format. You're going to see True Names, you're going to see Mongooses, since Rug is a very, very popular deck, and True Name is in so many different decks that I can't even list them all. So you really need to become prepared to deal with that. This card also single-handedly will win you games against control decks in the format. While there aren't that many of them, the discard effect will really, really put you over the top against like a Miracles deck. Jeez, I can't remember the name. So that's why I play 3 of them. She deals with a lot of problems. It's just an extra removal spell also. And it just helps a lot with a lot of the big decks in the format, and especially in our meta, which is very full of fair decks. The discard effect also can't be underrated against combo. When you play Liliana the Veil, like, you know, and it sits in play and discards for a couple turns, you're going to run your opponent out of cards. Especially if they're on a deck like Show and Tell that needs to have at least a 2-card combo to go off. You can force them to almost always be top decking, and they can't Show and Tell and Emrakul into play or Grizzlebrand into play if they only have 1 card. Like, I know that seems obvious, but it's a very, very big upside of the card. It's also, if it sits in play with at least 2 loyalty on it, they can't just Show and Tell in an Emrakul. It would die. However, they can play Grizzlebrand and draw a bunch of cards, which sucks a lot still. Then we have 2 one-ofs in our spells. We have a Jace the Mind Sculptor and a Maelstrom Pulse. Jace, you could easily play 2 of them if you wanted, but I find it a little difficult to cast, especially in a metagame that's got a lot of Wasteland and Stifle decks. You don't really get to 4 mana to just slam Jace on the table, nor do you want to against those decks. There's a time and place for Jace, but most of the matchups I'm playing aren't places I want Jace. I do want him against Miracles a lot of the time, but I chose to play Maelstrom Pulse instead. Not necessarily for that matchup, but I just chose to play Pulse instead. Pulse is very good in that matchup. It deals with all their angel tokens. It can destroy Counterbalance. It can destroy their Jaces, which are how they win normally. And it also deals with Batterskull. Like I said, that's one card we didn't really have an answer to with Abrupt Decay. So I just like to play the catch-all in Maelstrom Pulse. Back to Jace, it gives us an extra win condition to play 1 copy of it. Playing too many can get very cloggy since we're not main decking Force of Will. So we don't exactly have a way to just get rid of Jaces that are sitting in our hand. And it's, especially with the mana base we're using, which I'll get to in a minute, it can be easier said than done to actually cast a Jace. So I chose to keep that as a singleton as well as the Maelstrom Pulse rather. Just to deal with some problem matchups and diversify the deck a little bit. Next we'll talk about the lands a little bit. First off, we're running 9 fetch lands, which is a little bit low for a Brainstorm deck compared to some lists. I've seen lists playing as many as 11 fetch lands, which that seems high to me. But I guess it just depends on how you want to play the deck, what duels you want to play, what utility lands you want to play. The biggest reason I'm only running 9 fetches is because I'm running 6 utility lands. I run 3 Wasteland and 3 Creeping Tar Pits. Tar Pits is, again, another win condition. This deck doesn't exactly have a problem winning the game ever, but, excuse me. Tar Pits is a very, very good card against any other control deck. It'll force Swords to Plowshares from your opponents or Wastelands from your opponent if they play them. And then I'm playing 3 Wasteland because I also want to answer their utility lands. I don't really want to be across the table from their Tar Pits either. And running 3 Wasteland in the 3 Tar Pits is one of the reasons I said I'm only on 1 Jace. Because it can be very, very difficult to get to 4 mana, and sometimes your 4th land drop would be something like a Tar Pits, which delays your Jace an extra turn and makes you susceptible to Wasteland, so you can't play it. And when you're playing 3 Wastelands, I mean, effectively, these will be Stone Rains a lot of the time. Granted, I'm playing them for their utility lands so they can sit and play. But again, they become susceptible to Wasteland if I play them and use them to cast a card. So you have to be careful with when you do that. I think the card's very good in the deck. I don't want to deal with my opponent's Tar Pits. I want to be able to kill their Wastelands if they use them to cast a creature, so they're certainly not going anywhere. But if I was going to play a second Jace, I would probably tweak my mana a little bit and include less tap lands and Wastelands. Next I'm playing 6 duels, 2 tropical islands, 2 bays, and 2 underground seas. The number of these could easily be tweaked, but I also chose to run 1 island and 1 swamp. Again, partially out of fear of Wasteland, but mainly out of fear of Blood Moon. A card I'm not running that I probably should, if that's my logic behind running the basics, is a Forest, so I can cast Abrupt Decay and Maelstrom Balls while they have Blood Moon in play. But I'm still working on the list a little bit, tweaking here and there. And that's a card that might come in. The problem with running a basic Forest is how few green cards you actually need to cast normally. So you're never really going to fetch for a Forest playing around Wasteland, but you will fetch for one against Blood Moon decks, which puts you in an interesting situation when choosing to play the card. That's why I chose not to play it. It just doesn't come up enough in most matchups. It's very, very specialized. It's a card I want against Blood Moon decks and not against anything else, which there's not too many Blood Moon decks that see play anywhere, let alone in our metagame. So that's what I chose to go with. Tropical Island is actually the worst duel in the deck. You'd probably be better off with either another Bay or Underground Sea. I would still keep one of these, but these are the duels that I've chose to use for right now. And then, again, the basics you actually don't need to play. I do have a fear of Blood Moon and a fear of Wastelands, and I like playing basic lands in my deck. So I've stuck with these for now, as well as the 9 fetches instead of going up to something like 10. The mana base is something that you can tweak easily, and truthfully, in a deck like this, isn't going to change your win percentage that much. Yes, you can get a little edge here and there, but at the end of the day, switching any of the lands from here to something else isn't going to change too much. Next, let's talk about the sideboard. Like I said, the deck's built to play in our meta, which is mostly fair decks, very, very, very few combo decks. So the sideboard is built for those combo decks for the most part. There's 3 Forces, 3 Thoughtseize, 3 Nihil Spellbombs, a Grafdigger's Cage, and a Vendilion Clique, all of which you can bring in against combo decks. They all help disrupt in different ways. There's some other cards in here, obviously, for other matchups. Golgari Charm is one of the best sideboard cards in the format. It can blank Abrupt Decay, which very few other cards can. It can kill True Name Nemesis, and it can kill Rest in Pieces and other enchantments that you need to deal with. Toxic Deluge is also a card that deals with True Name Nemesis and other creature decks. A lot of people aren't familiar with the card, so I'll just read it off real quick. As an additional cost to play, you pay X life, and then all creatures get -X until the end of the turn. So it's essentially a Wrath of God effect for your deck if you need it. In some matchups, you will want that. Thoughtseize, targeted removal, or discard rather, is just good in general. Against every combo deck, you'll always want that. Same with Vendilion Clique. It serves a similar purpose while also being a 3/1 body, which is relevant in some matchups. Force of Will, again, a combo or a free counter spell for the combo decks. Nihil Spellbomb and Grafdigger's Cage serve similar purposes. Cage is better against the actual combo decks, but Nihil Spellbomb is just good against real decks that rely on their graveyard. That's why the split is that way. Grafdigger's Cage can give you a free win against Dredge, and to a lesser extent Reanimator. They're going to bring in Show and Tell, most likely, which makes it a little less powerful, but still strong nonetheless. It's going to shut off their normal plan and put them on 4 Show and Tells to go off, which is, you know, much more fair for them to only have one way to go off instead of 8 reanimate spells or however many if their list is playing. I don't know specifics. But that's what I've chose for my sideboard. It's, like I said, just a lot of combo prevention. Your main board is really built to play against other fair decks already. So I dedicated most of my sideboard to playing against the rest of the field. You don't need to tweak too much when you're siding. Your deck's a very tuned machine, really, because of the cascade mechanic. So you don't want to include cards in your sideboard that you're going to cascade into and be upset. That's really it for the deck. We're going to have some videos of it being played coming up soon, which you'll be able to see. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to post this, and then within a couple days afterwards, we'll get the matches up. Thanks for watching, guys.